Today I talk about improving consistency, trusting teammates, and the benefits of smurfing. Welcome to Ask Weldon, episode 73. So I'm back at it again, and only had one day off this time. So I think I'm doing pretty good. I actually recorded 2 shows so that I didn't actually have a day off, according to YouTube, which is awesome. But anyway, I'm sick, but I made it into the office and try to burn through this show. What other news do I have? No news to announce as far as new teams I'm training. It's the off season kind of, so not much going on there. Working on a new website idea. So if anybody of you code Angular JavaScript with Firebase as the backend, hit me up. Yeah, otherwise not much. Why don't we just dig into the questions?
Anonymous asks, why do I go through long states of amazing play and then long states of below average play?
So this is somebody like at a pretty high level of play, and they're talking about how they'll like burn through like 1 to 3 weeks of crushing it, and then 1 to 3 weeks of mediocre. So there's so many variables that go into this. So let me start off by saying that a lot of this is self-perception. They did a study in basketball of the difference between objective performance and perceived performance from the athlete's point of view. And they found out that the athlete's perceived performance varied wildly, whereas the objective performance did not vary as much or in the same way. So like our perceived performance is not really correlated with our objective performance. So that's the first warning sign, is just like make sure you're talking about your objective performance and not your perceived performance. Secondly, there are variables that go into this in terms of concentration. So like in a sport that is like traditional, you might injure yourself. But in League of Legends, you might die more often. Okay, so but it results from the same thing, which is like not paying attention. So there was this study by Ericsson in Sweden that he looked at the injury rate in like elite football teams, and what they did was before the match, in the intervention group, before the matches, they had people do mindfulness meditation, just like set aside all the crap going on in their lives or the last game or whatever, and just like focus on bringing themselves present for the training that they were doing. Then they went into the training, and their injury rates for the preseason, which is like a 12-week training period, dropped from 23 on average per squad to 1 to 0. Injury rate. So it was a massive, significant difference statistically in terms of like how your mind, like wandering about the troubles and stresses of your life, can cause you to injure yourself. And the same is true in, of course, esport. It's just that your injury isn't like you run into somebody or twist your ankle or like miss the kick and fall over or whatever. It's that you die or you miss the skill shot or whatever. So you can mitigate a lot of this like objective drop in performance by making sure that you train when you're ready to train and you don't train when you're not ready to train. Or you consciously set aside that time as a little bit sacred, and you do some sort of mindfulness exercise or some sort of warm-up prep that gets you focused on the game and not worrying about the other stuff that's like going wrong and that you can't control in your life. Yeah. And then also your strength in the game is a lot based on your motivation, and your motivation goes in cycles. So sometimes you're like highly motivated, sometimes you're low motivated, and that's like an internal system, and you can't really avoid that cycle, but you can mitigate it. You can say like, despite my low motivation, I want a high level of performance, and that comes from focus, which comes from a special kind of training, which is like I know how to try hard when I don't feel like try harding, and I can endure the emotional frustration that goes along with that in the pursuit of higher performance. But that takes kind of like a pretty high level goal and a lot of grit. So that's more of a mental exercise than anything else, and also an emotional regulation exercise and emotional toughness exercise. But mostly it's just like, how badly do you want it? If you want it super badly, you're willing to tolerate a lot more than somebody who kind of like maybe perhaps wants it, but has other things that they prioritize in life, and so it's not that big a deal. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question. That's a really good one we could dig into for hours. That's like 99.9% of what I do for my job every single day. And so it's like it can't be answered in a single question, but it was a great question to ask.
Anonymous asks, how do I stop pre-game anxiety and stop believing that all my teammates are bad?
There's two components to this. One component to pregame anxiety is like exposure. So you expose yourself to the anxiety situation long enough that your brain stops believing to be anxious about it. And that just happens from like doing it over and over again. Then there's a component of that anxiety that you cannot ever remove because it's competition. So you're always going to be on stage, especially when people are watching you, and it never goes away no matter how long you expose yourself to it. There's chemicals in the brain that pop up when you're in competition, and those are there. And for that, pre-game anxiety, you have to be able to cope with it, which means like, what are your emotional coping mechanisms? Do you tell yourself, I'm nervous, or do you tell yourself, I'm excited? Because chemically it feels the same, but mentally you trigger different responses when you do it. When you like are about to enter a trade at level 2 in your ranked game, your very first trade of the game, and you're like, okay, I'm going to maybe go all in on this, and your heart starts beating faster. Do you tell yourself, oh, I'm sweating, I'm going to suck, I'm going to screw up? Or do you tell yourself, I'm ready, I'm engaged, I'm about to dive in on this, and like my body is responding to that adrenaline? Because the same thing is happening chemically, but depending on your interpretation of it, you're going to be like ready to freeze up and choke, or ready to like hyper focus and go all in. So pre-game anxiety and pre-game excitement, same thing. Physically, different things mentally. So you got to reorient yourself around the pressure that you feel when you are about to put yourself out there in a ranked match, and realize that that pressure is actually going to accelerate your growth and improve your play, and not try to run away from it. Okay, how do you stop believing that all your teammates are pure dog poop? Well, one thing you could do is I could tell you that there's two things you can focus on. Or there's two different angles you can focus. Your brain can focus externally on things that you cannot control, like your teammates, or internally on things you can control, like your own reactions and focusing on your controllables. And you will have higher objective performance if you focus on your controllables than if you focus on your teammates. So I would see your teammates as part of an unchangeable system that you can only control through like certain kinds of communication, and not worry about it so much, and focus on your controllables, which are the task that you're doing, the game that you're performing, and moving on from mistakes, right? So, and then also you have to believe that just because somebody makes a mistake, that doesn't mean they're going to repeat it. So looking to future and trying to engineer a good scenario instead of looking to the past and being so frustrated by it. And that's not just in your teammates' play, but that's also in your own play as well, because you're going to make mistakes and have bad games. And the other thing that I would recommend that I use a lot is I imagine that every game I'm in with a person who's making a lot of mistakes, that they're having like the worst day and the worst game of their life. Like normally they never play like that, and that day they are. Because I can justify that, because I've had games where I go in and I'm like, oh my God, I'm 0-12 Katarina. What the heck happened? So I know that's possible. And so I imagine, okay, there's 90 million League of Legends players. I'm in a random game with random people every single time. The percentage probability that one of those people is having a horrible game, like the worst game of their week, is pretty high. So I just pretend that's their game. And I'm like, and I try to feel sorry for them, because they're obviously feeling like crap instead of feeling like annoyed at them. And that helps, because like if you think about you when you're in a super defensive situation where you're having a super crappy game, you're liable to lash out at other people to make yourself feel better, and like you can't cope with it, and so you're just embarrassed and you're like whatever, and they're probably feeling the same way. So that helps me kind of cope with their struggles and maybe empathize with them instead of lash out at them.
Stevie asks, if you have a higher elo account, would you consider it good to have a smurf account to practice on, and how would you practice on it?
Personally, I don't have a smurf account because I want to always have, I don't ever want to be relaxed in a game. I want to always have the pressure, and I want to try to find a way to cope with that pressure and like feel like I'm trying to push out my performance level. But there are really good reasons to have a smurf. One of them is to practice specific skills, practice new champions, practice different roles, and to like change your mental orientation from like training to relaxation. So if you're an esporter, so I don't mean a gamer, not if you're a gamer, if you're an esporter is a subset of gamers, not a subset, it's a side set. Some people overlap. Some people who are esporters are also gamers. Plenty of people who are esporters are not gamers. They're just like play for competition, and that's it. So if you are an esporter and you train to improve and like the competition is like what drives you and what fires you, then you can, like, everything you're doing on your main account is like training, right? So it's good to then say like, well, now I want to be a gamer. I want to play purely for entertainment and fun. And for that, I have this Smurf and I go there. And this is like my relaxation mode. So it helps you transition from mode to mode so that when you can like troll and lose a game and try a different build and have fun, you're not in like, I have to optimize, I have to train, I have to be better after this game. You can be like, okay, I can just like kind of have fun after this game. And it lets you maybe experiment with new things and get more into the zone and more into flow without like thinking so much about the consequences, which is what the pressure training is all about. So I recommend this, for example, for pros to have Smurfs, because it's like you play a game for your job and then you also play the same game for fun. And where's the line between that? How do you know when you're doing a solo queue game in the evening that you're supposed to do for your job because you have a tournament coming up or like a match on the weekend? And how do you know when you're like, okay, I need to relax from this hard day of training and just play the game that I love to play, but like this isn't training, I just want to play it. So for that, a Smurf like helps delineate those two focus areas. So why don't we make that the question of the day? Do you have a Smurf account, and why? Post in the comments below or post in the comments above or to the side or wherever they happen to be on this medium that you're watching, and just tell us all, like, what is the purpose of your Smurf account? Why do you Smurf? What do you use it for, psychologically or physically, or for queue times or something like that? Yeah, and let's see what everybody has to say. Don't forget that you can ask a question for the show on mindgames.gg/AskWeldon. I think I actually have it back up now. The website's not finished yet, so you can't take any of the courses. There's going to be a course on mindfulness there, and as well as a course on like physical activity and stuff. So like the thing I talked about, like the mindfulness before the training to get yourself focused and reduce your error rate, I'm putting up the training that I do with the pro teams there, and there's like a placeholder page for courses, but you can't buy anything yet, and it's not priced yet or anything. But I have like 50 videos now prepped, and they're uploaded, and I'm trying to configure the course. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. Otherwise, I have the Ask a Question page back up. It's mindgames.gg/AskWeldon, or you can go to Twitter and just hit up #AskWeldon, and it will populate into the thing I'm reading this from, which is where I get all the questions in order. I'm working through from like early March. You guys probably have been very patient with me on getting your questions answered, and I might have to skip some. So if I don't get to them by, mid-May, then maybe resubmit it. Make sure it gets answered. Okay. Have a good day. See you tomorrow.